Hey, I hope you guys are doing good today. We are going to be watching the shipwreck so gruesome it changed laws, and I am very interested in this one. I don't think I know anything about this. So here we are. If you do get a chance, I'd appreciate if you can leave a like and subscribe. It helps me out a bunch. And I will have Scary Interesting's video linked in my description below. So be sure to go give him a like and subscribe. He does an amazing job with all of these stories. I absolutely love this channel. All right, let's see what happened with this shipwreck. Let's go.
In 1884, an incident occurred in the Atlantic Ocean that was so gruesome that it would eventually forever be written into English law, with the hope that something like it would never happen again. This is that horrifying story, and although the events in this video are fleeting and non-descriptive, they are still highly disturbing, so viewer discretion is strongly advised.
I'm ready.
There's a name that's become so synonymous with maritime tragedy that anyone who has it is recommended to keep both feet firmly planted on dry land for life. That name is Richard Parker, and it has a unique place in the history
I already feel this way. I mean, like the ocean is scary to me, so I am good. I am good.
on dry land for life. That name is Richard Parker, and it has a unique place in the history of seafaring. It all began in 1797 when a man named Richard Parker was a lead conspirator in a naval mutiny. When his plans were discovered, though, he was hanged from his own ship's yardarm. Then, exactly 40 years later, writer Edgar Allan Poe published a novel called The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym. And in it, a character named Richard Parker led a mutiny aboard a ship called the Grampus, which eventually wrecked. Richard, along with the other survivors of the sinking, were left adrift in the vast ocean in a dinghy with no supplies. After days of torturous hunger and thirst, Richard suggests to the others that they invoke something called the custom of the sea. This is a
Mm.
tradition no one who's ever sailed wants to be involved in, but all of the circumstances were just right for carrying it out. Unfortunately, this suggestion backfired for Richard and resulted in something horrific happening to him. But even that is not the final Richard. It's often said that fact is stranger than fiction, and in 1880,
That is always true. That is always true. True, true.
the final Richard. It's often said that fact is stranger than fiction, and in 1884, another Richard Parker would be entered into maritime legend and law books as part of a legal precedent that is still taught to this day.
Oh, wow.
On May 19th of that year, a yacht known as the Mignonette left port from Southampton, England, with 4 men aboard: Captain Tom Dudley, crewmen Ed Brooks and Edwin Stevens, and Richard Parker, who was the cabin boy. The yacht had been bought by a wealthy Australian man, and the crew's job was going to be to deliver the boat to him. Tom had gotten the job because he had a long reputation as an excellent sailor and a man of integrity and honesty. He was also a natural leader for experienced and inexperienced men alike. Ed and Edwin were also seasoned, experienced sailors who had seen it all at sea, but for 17-year-old Richard, this would be his first big open water voyage.
He was 17. Oh my gosh, he's so young.
He did come from a family of seafarers, and he was no stranger to sailing, but the extent of his experience had been in shallower coastal waters. But despite this, it was a trip he was looking forward to with both excitement and apprehension, but his concerns eased after a few days on the open ocean. Their trip to Australia from Southampton was obviously a long one and required the ship sail south past Europe, then around Africa, before finally crossing the Indian Ocean to Australia.
This does look like kind of like a long journey here. They're going far.
More than a month of sailing, the crew faced very little trouble. The weather, short of a few squalls here and there, was cooperative and the seas remained mostly calm, which the men were thankful for, being in such a small ship. The Mignonette was only 52 feet or 16 meters long, and getting it to Australia would be 15,000 miles of sailing. In fact, this was such a dangerous task that the wealthy Australian owner struggled to even form a crew to deliver it.
I would say I can't blame them for, a lot of people saying no to this.
Yachts, for the most part, typically weren't built for this type of journey, but unfortunately there was no other way to get the Mignonette to its new owner otherwise. So the 4 aboard the ship stayed cautious while still enjoying sailing in pristine conditions. All of this would change around 1,500 miles off the coast of Africa when the Mignonette was traveling from the Portuguese island of Madeira to Cape Town, South Africa. On July 5th, the yacht was ahead of a storm with winds up to 54 miles an hour or 87 kilometers an hour. Tom then gave the order to perform something called a heave-to. This is a way to adjust the sails and rudder so that they counteract one another. This then allows a boat to stay fairly stationary even in a storm, and if done correctly, the boat's bow will also be pointed slightly off to wind to reduce the impact of the waves as well. When Tom gave the order late at night, the men performed the heave-to, and as it was just about to be complete, he sent Richard below deck to grab him a cup of tea. As Richard got below deck though, a rogue wave smashed into the yacht and basically removed one entire side of it.
Oh my
Seeing
gosh.
this, Tom knew there was no chance of keeping the mignonette above water and ordered that the lifeboat be lowered immediately. Then, in less than 5 minutes, the mignonette was already on its way to the bottom of the ocean, and
Oh
the four
man.
stunned men watched from their small dinghy that was barely suitable for a day of fishing in a calm.
See, this is the stuff that terrifies me about the water too, is that like if something were to ever happen, it's not like you're on land where you're like, okay, like let's just walk and eventually we'll probably find somewhere or, we can find our way out or whatever, right? But like the water, like this is about as good as it gets, like even today, maybe you have like a life raft or something. I don't know. I do not mess around with water. I'm because it kind of scares me, and this would be my worst nightmare.
And the four stunned men watched from their small dinghy that was barely suitable
Gosh.
for a day of fishing in a calm lake. The boards that made up the lifeboat were only a quarter inch or 6 millimeters thick, and if that wasn't bad enough, the lowering of the lifeboat punctured a small hole in its hull.
Oh no.
This was just the beginning though. Before the ship sank, Tom was only able to grab 2 1-pound tins of canned turnips and a chronometer, which is an instrument used for navigation. When the storm cleared, they found that there
That was
wasn't a
it.
speck of land in sight, and they had no drinkable water for the 4 of them. And if that wasn't bad enough, on their first night, a shark began bumping the lifeboat around, causing the crew to have to beat it back with their oars.
Oh gosh.
Then, for 2 days, the 4 men ate and drank nothing at all, and it was then that Tom pulled out one of the cans of turnips and divided them into 5 pieces, which were then rationed out to the men over the next 2 days. But obviously, it wasn't nearly enough to
Hmm.
survive on for long.
No, definitely not. I mean, this is like I mean, they have no water because obviously you can't drink ocean water. They don't have anything to fix that, and then they have 2 cans, and then what, I don't oh gosh. This sounds horrible.
Around July 9th, in a stroke of luck, Ed spotted a sea turtle and Edwin was able to capture it.
Oh.
With no way to cook it, they had to eat it raw, but with about 3 pounds of meat on it, the turtle sustained them for a few extra days and stretched their supply of turnips.
Oh my god, I could not imagine eating a turtle raw. I mean, I can't imagine eating a turtle in general. I mean, but I get if you're starving, you are gonna do this, and I do not blame them, but like, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Unfortunately for them, killing the turtle was difficult and messy, and the blood became contaminated with seawater, so they weren't able to drink it. They
Right.
did manage to consume the rest of it, but the turnips and turtle were completely gone by mid-July.
Oh
As they got
man.
ever closer to dying of dehydration, the 4 men tried to catch rainwater to drink, but other than a few sips here and there, they weren't able to collect nearly enough to put a dent in their thirst. Things got so bad that they started drinking their own urine, which had the opposite effect of their intentions.
Mhm.
Contrary to popular belief, this only dehydrates the body faster than not drinking anything at all.
Right.
Additionally, the water content of it decreases with each ingestion, and as that happens, it becomes more concentrated with harmful waste. After a
Oof.
few more days, Richard couldn't take the pain of dehydration anymore and leaned over the side of the dinghy and started lapping up the seawater by the handful.
Oh no.
Unlike drinking urine, it was already long known that drinking seawater was a big mistake. Had Richard had just a small amount of water, he probably would have been fine, but drinking it in large quantities like he did was likely a death sentence.
Oh, I guess that's true. Yeah, like if you just took like a sip, maybe it probably wouldn't be as bad, I would say. But there's so much salt in this water. Oh my god, yeah, this is like, and he's just lapping it up. Oh god, yeah, this is not going to be good.
When he drank his fill, he immediately felt relief, but as hours passed, he became
Hmm.
violently sick.
Yeah.
First, he was overcome with diarrhea as the seawater ran through him, and this only dehydrated him more.
Yep.
Then, another day later, Richard's condition only worsened and he collapsed onto the bottom of the dinghy, basically unable to move. Meanwhile, the other 3 weren't much better off. They may not have been ill from drinking too much seawater, but they were ravenously hungry and very close to dying of thirst.
Are they going to eat Richard? Are they going to eat him? I mean, I can't blame them if they do, but I mean, oh gosh.
It was then, as they watched Richard on the bottom of the boat, that Tom brought up the custom of the sea. As they talked about it, Edwin wasn't sure about it, and Ed flat out would not agree to it.
Mm.
That night, Richard deteriorated even more and was clearly close to death. Upon seeing this in the morning, Tom brought up the topic again, and once again he was rebuffed by Ed. Beyond the obvious reason that no one wants to eat another person, there was another good reason for his hesitancy. The custom of the sea requires such serious consideration because agreeing to it puts your own life on the line. It requires that everyone draw straws to determine the fate of one of the survivors of shipwreck. Whoever drew the shortest straw would be sacrificed so the others could live, meaning the loser would be eaten. This custom was obviously reserved for the most dire situations, and
Right.
obviously is about as barbaric as it gets, but the way
I mean, as bad and as it sounds, though, I mean, when you're starving, and you kind of are in this situation, like, I don't blame them. I honestly don't. And I think that if you are judged as such, like, you clearly have never been starving because starving people do a lot of desperate things. And unfortunately, in this situation, I do kind of feel like Richard's kind of screwed. Like, I don't think Richard's gonna make it. And then what? Like, if and I'm not saying that, under any other circumstance, I think this is fine, but I think that, I mean, look at the situation they're in. They're starving. Richard's probably gonna die because he is now, like, so dehydrated, and there's no coming back from that at this point, not in this situation. And then, if it's like your one shot at surviving, I would probably eat Richard too.
was obviously reserved for the most dire situations, and obviously is about as barbaric as it gets, but the way it was done, or said to have been done, was always strict and to the letter. In an odd way, there was a supposed integrity to the process that sailors at the time honored. The rules were unwritten, but as
I
sailors
mean, that's
understood them,
fair.
there was very little room for interpretation. These are the three requirements that must be met for the custom of the sea to be performed. The first is that the situation had to be a dire one of life or death on the verge of starvation or dehydration.
I think that is a good way to start out. I've never even heard of this, the custom of the sea like, I've never heard of it, so this is actually really interesting to me.
The first is that the situation had to be a dire one of life or death on the verge of starvation or dehydration. The second is the decision had to be unanimous among
Mm,
survivors. If
okay,
even one person was against the idea, it could go no further.
that's fair.
And the third is that the selection process had to be fair, giving each sailor an equal chance to end up being chosen. Incredibly, at the time, although not what you might call socially acceptable, there was more of an understanding of this practice. If the custom was performed to the letter and the selection was fair, participating in it was seen as nothing to hide, even if it was still an incredibly difficult subject. There was sort of a grudging recognition of its necessity under certain circumstances. And because of the many dangers of the sea, the custom was not as rare as you might hope. The threat of a shipwreck during this time period was very real, and there were many unfortunate crews left to make the decision to sacrifice one of their own so the others could live.
I believe that. I totally believe that, especially, like, for the time period. I mean, that makes a lot of sense, and to have, like, maybe, like, an unspoken rule about what would happen and how you would handle it if were stranded in a lifeboat like this, and you ran out of food, you ran out of water, like, and you kind of got in this situation. It makes a lot of sense. Although I am curious to know about what's going to happen in this situation, though, because you have one person who is basically dying. So then, do you still, like, is that fairness? Like, is that fair enough that, like, like, do you wait till he's dead, or do you kill him and then eat him? Like, I don't know. I mean, like, it just seems like, either way, Richard is not going to make it. So then it almost seems kind of fair to maybe, eat him at the same time, because, like, this is a very dire situation and you don't know, I guess, if you are going to be rescued in the next 2 hours, 2 weeks, 2 days, but either way, I think this is like a very hard situation to be in, because at the same time, I mean, this is like a coworker or somebody that you at least know, and I don't think anybody takes, eating somebody lightly in situations like this. I also can't imagine being this hungry that this is like an option that's on the table, right? And so I feel like this is just a hard situation all around for everybody involved.
There were many unfortunate crews left to make the decision to sacrifice one of their own so the others could live. Legally, however, countries struggled to determine how to handle the custom while wrestling with the question of whether or not a murder could be justified by the necessity of a dire situation.
Right.
Like, for example, in the 1600s, 7 English sailors were lost at sea for more than 2 weeks, and like the crew of the Mignonette, they had very little supplies in their lifeboat. In a twist of fate, the man who proposed the custom at sea was the very same one who drew the short straw. When the
Mm.
survivors were rescued, they were returned to the Caribbean island of St. Christopher to stand trial for murder. However, the remaining survivors were pardoned after the judge found that the killing was indeed a necessity. In another example, in 18
I can definitely see where some things kind of maybe end up in a gray area for this because it's like a, you're not necessarily murdering somebody because, for the sake of, right? Like you're doing it for survival and if everybody agreed to this because, they think that it's at least if somebody can survive this, then it's worth me like if I draw the short stick, then it's worth me dying if it's going to save everybody else. And it seems like if it is a unanimous decision that everybody is going to agree to this, it is kinda selfless of everybody, because like, at that point, like, nobody knows, like, who's gonna draw the short stick, so that seems fair.
20, a whaling ship called the Essex was ran by a whale and its survivors were scattered and separated into 3 small boats. During the survival ordeal, 6 died from either starvation or exposure or both, and 1 was sacrificed chosen by the custom. After drawing straws, a man named Owen was the unfortunate crewman who pulled the short one. His sacrifice then allowed the others to live and ultimately survive the ordeal. Back on the little dinghy later that night, Tom brought it up again, only this time with a slight change in his proposition. This time, instead of drawing straws, he proposed that they could just sacrifice Richard since it appeared as though he was going to die anyway.
Right,
If that
right.
was the case, he might as well die so that the other 3 could live long enough to hopefully be rescued. Once again, though, Ed would not hear of it. He found the idea to be repulsive and was surprised that someone of Tom's character and distinction would even suggest it. For Ed,
I mean, I give credit to everybody involved in this. I mean, yes, everybody's hungry, and I can also see that, because Richard isn't dead yet, that Ed does feel this way and he doesn't think it's right. And like I don't necessarily am like saying anybody's wrong in this situation by any means because this is a very, very serious situation to be in and to take it lightly, isn't and I don't think anybody is, but to be against this, I don't think is wrong. And to be for it, I don't think it's wrong either.
impulsive and was surprised that someone of Tom's character and distinction would even suggest it. For Edwin, on the other hand, the idea began to make sense. As Tom pointed out,
Because
each
they're
of them had wives
hungry.
and multiple children, while Richard was still a teenager, and it would be better for a single man to die than for many children to grow up without fathers. With this suggestion, tension began to rise in the dinghy. Even though Ed was
Uh-oh.
against the idea, since it was 2-on-1 and Tom had already decided to forego the rules, his protest might mean nothing in the end. But either way, no decision was made that night, and the men agreed to sleep on it. As the next day wore on and there was no sign of land or life anywhere, Tom and Edwin made eye contact, which they both took as silent agreement to Tom's plan. For a
Right.
moment, Tom paused to say a prayer while Edwin slowly knelt down at the bottom of the dinghy. When Tom was ready, Edwin grabbed hold of Richard's legs to keep him from flailing, and Tom brought his penknife down into Richard's neck. Edwin then continued to hold him down while Tom grabbed the case for the chronometer and began filling it from the wound he just made. When enough of it had accumulated, he then drank from the case before handing it to Edwin, who did the same. Edwin then extended it to Ed, who was stunned and horrified by what he was witnessing.
Yeah.
Reluctantly, though, he took the case and liquid filled his dry mouth for the first time in days.
I feel like this is such a hard, hard situation to be in, honestly. Like as much as I would like to say like I would do either or, I honestly don't know. I don't know, but I would say that if you are this starving and dehydrated and you know that like at any time like you could probably be next. I mean, I feel like they are probably at a point in time where if something isn't done, whether, be especially for hydration purposes, like your days are numbered at this point. So like if you are trying everything to get back to your family and you this is your one shot, and unfortunately for Richard, I don't know, I mean, it kinda sounds like Richard was not gonna make it either way, and I'm not saying that, like, it's okay to do this, but at the same time, I definitely understand it. I definitely, definitely understand it that this is like an extreme circumstance of they're gonna do everything they can to try and survive, and unfortunately, sometimes that is doing some morbid things and things that you would never do in your daily life, but at the same time, I mean, like I said, we don't know how far away they are from being saved. I mean, it could be a while, like, after this, after they eat Richard, like, what if it's, like, another and that gets it buys them another week or 2 because it's gonna be 2 weeks before anything happens, whereas, like, within that 2 weeks, they would probably all be dead.
When Richard had passed, Tom and Edwin then undressed him and began removing the edible portions. Finally, they were full and satisfied for the first time since they caught the turtle. Tom and Edwin then continued to remove the edible portions they ate raw for as long as the remains stayed fresh. For the next 4 days, the three consumed as much as they could before it started to rot.
Yeah.
Hunger set back
That is the other thing too, right? Like, you're only gonna be able to eat so much before it all goes bad because, like, there's no like, you don't have anything. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess if you were all in for, I guess, all dying together, that would be fine too. And then if you decide to do this, I think that's fine too. I don't know. I don't feel like I can sit here and judge the situation of like whether or not I think these men did right or wrong because this seems like such a desperate, really, really bad situation to be in. So I think whatever, plays out either way, I'm definitely not judging them in any way, shape, or form because like I said, I don't know what I would do. I would probably more be inclined to sacrificing myself for the good, if we had to draw sticks or draw straws on it, because if it meant that other people could survive, I think I would like to think that I would be okay with being selfless like that, as opposed to like, we should all just die together.
in soon after, but on July 29th, only a few days after killing Richard, they finally saw a ship coming toward them. A German vessel named the Montezuma was on its way to Hamburg when it spotted the dinghy and brought Tom, Edwin, and Ed on board, ending what was almost a month-long ordeal.
It's a
When they
month?
picked up
Oh
the
my
three
gosh.
survivors, the crew of the ship couldn't help but notice the state of the dinghy. The inside of it was coated in blood, and some of the remains were still on board. This obviously led to a lot of questions, but Tom told them everything. As captain, he felt justified in the decision because it was done out of necessity.
Yeah.
After all, it was a survival practice that was more understood at the time. This didn't really lessen the impact, but then even more stunning for the crew of the Montezuma, Tom insisted on bringing the rotting remains on board so they could be given a proper Christian burial in England.
I think that's fair.
It took more than a month for the ship to finish its journey, and when it arrived on September 6 in England, the Montezuma's captain accompanied Tom, Edwin, and Ed to see the customs officer and report their arrival. The four men then met with customs, and Tom explained the ordeal of being set adrift at sea and what happened to Richard, and as he did, a local police sergeant was in the room, listening in on
Uh-oh.
everything. Given the disturbing events he just learned, the sergeant didn't know what to do with the three men and sought legal advice while keeping them detained. The captain and crew of the Montezuma were also not allowed to leave for Hamburg during this time because they'd be crucial witnesses if there were any legal proceedings. Then, after a brief investigation that included multiple interviews, Tom, Edwin, and Ed were charged with Richard's murder. And Tom, more than anyone else, was shocked by this. The way he saw it, anyone else in the same situation would have done the same thing.
I would agree. I mean, but at the same time, I feel like this is like again, like we're kind of in a weird gray area, and especially for this type, I'm sure there's lots of people that would have been like, I would never do this, right? But they've clearly never been stranded, starving, dehydrated, and now it's been a month. And, I don't think anybody in this situation has ever been in these men's shoes, to say for certain that they would, 100% not do this.
What Tom didn't know was that the English legal system was looking for an opportunity to establish murder at sea as a punishable crime. The law was
Oh.
still without a set precedent in cases of violent death at the hands of others at sea until the crew of the Mignonette arrived back in England. So,
I can also kind of see the other side of this too because, there are bad people in this world and like this time period, is no different. So, I could see somebody who has nefarious reasons be put in a perfect situation of, I guess, murdering people. But then I don't even think that that's really that valid either because if you were to I mean, well, I guess one way to look at it is if I guess if he killed everybody, then he could say, like, "This is just what happened." The other side of it is that it doesn't seem like some of these men kind of were necessarily like that, especially if they were in the situation, so I don't know. I'm not really sure. I guess I kinda have a mixed bag of feelings about this.
Violent death at the hands of others at sea until the crew of the Mignonette arrived back in England. So, in the days following their return, Tom, Edwin, and Ed were taken for arraignment. During this, and after learning of Ed's unwillingness to participate in Richard's killing, he was allowed to go free without penalty. Either way, this case and story would go on to be covered feverishly by European media. The
Mm.
story had sensational elements that gripped the public, and the sentiment was mostly in favor of Tom and Edwin's decision.
I bet this was, like, a huge headline because, I mean, I think even today it would be a huge headline of, any sort of cannibalism that goes on, but I think it still boils down to this is a horrendous situation to be in, and I don't know, I think it's, like, one of those things that I guess unless you've actually lived it, I don't know if it's easy enough to pass judgment.
There was even occasion for Tom and Edwin to meet Richard's brother, Daniel, and Daniel shook both their hands. As a sailor, Daniel believed they made the right decision. The
Okay.
judge who would hear the case, however, made it clear as the trial got started in November that there was no justification for killing another human being that the law would recognize, which many viewed as clear favoritism shown towards prosecutors.
Right.
Additionally, being found guilty of murder at the time meant immediate execution, so if Tom and Edwin were found guilty, they would be put to death.
Oh.
But then, when the jury finished their deliberations, they came to a unanimous decision that all of the men would have died if they hadn't done what they did. There was a
Mhm.
caveat, though. The judge had informed the jury prior to deliberations that they would have the option of returning a special verdict. By doing so, the jury would collectively recognize that they couldn't tell if Tom and Edwin were guilty of murder, and that's exactly the verdict they opted for. As a result, the case was sent to a higher court, which consisted of 5 judges and no jury.
Oh, no. I kinda feel like this is gonna screw them, though. That's kinda how I feel about it because I would imagine that maybe some of the people on the jury probably could have been in some sort of, like, boating business of the sorts, or they were sailors themselves or something, or at least saw that side of it of, this was something that was really terrible, and had they been out there for a month with absolutely, like, 0 luck of, no turtle, no nothing, like, if they had like, they wouldn't have made it.
As a result, the case was sent to a higher court, which consisted of 5 judges and no jury. Little time was wasted between the decision and the higher court beginning its proceedings, and this is where some sticky legal topics were sorted out. The
Mm,
defense argued that Richard's killing was a necessity based on the context of the situation. The
right.
problem with that argument, though, was that it had never been made before, so the trial was as much about the validity of that claim as it was about determining the guilt or innocence of Tom and Edwin. Afterward, there were 2 different precedents that the judges were presented as they heard the case. The first was killing in self-defense, which was recognized as a necessity in certain cases. Like, for example, if things played out where Richard fought back against Tom and Tom is the one who ended up dead, this would be considered a justifiable homicide. On
Oh,
the other
okay.
hand, the prosecution argued that there was also established precedent for not justifying murder. In English law, a homeless man who steals a loaf of bread because he's starving is not justified in doing so, even though the theft was out of necessity. So in the end, the judges sided with the prosecution, and Tom and Edwin were sentenced to
Oh,
death.
man.
The one thing the 2 men did have going for them throughout the trial, though, was public opinion, even after the verdict and sentencing were handed down. And because the 2 had so much support among citizens of the United Kingdom, the court felt pressure to pardon them, and this is what the media was expecting to happen to them next.
Oh, man. Yeah, because I mean, imagine living through this and then being like, "Oh, well, like, I should've just died out there," since, like, that's how I would feel about this. Like, if I had lived through this and survived it and then had to go through all this and then I still got sentenced to death, I would have been like, "Well, then this was all pointless. We all should've just died out there then."
Kingdom, the court felt pressure to pardon them, and this is what the media was expecting to happen to them next. Then, a few days passed with no word of one, and it looked bleak for Tom and Edwin. But thankfully for them, instead of a pardon, the court commuted the sentence down to just 6 months in prison.
Hmm.
This was the first time any country had made any sort of legal decision on how to handle the custom of the sea, and the case remains a foundational reference to this day.
Well, at least they just got 6 months though, because I feel like If they went through with this and actually did give them the death sentence, I don't know. I mean, that almost seems worse for Richard's death. It was like Richard died for absolutely nothing because you were just going to kill these men anyway. So, I mean, that's kind of wild though.
Decision on how to handle the custom of the seat, and the case remains a foundational reference to this day. So I'm curious, legal issues aside, since it's clearly understood what would happen if it were to happen today, what would you have done in the same situation as the man on the dinghy? Would you have drawn straws as per tradition, or would you have chosen the weakest, like they did? Or is there some other scenario that makes more sense? Let me know down in the comments what you think you would have done. In any case, thanks so much for watching. If you have a story suggestion, feel free to submit it to the form found in the description, and hopefully I will see you in the next one.
This was a fantastic video. This was very, very interesting. And he told us beautifully too. And as to say like what I would do 100%, I don't know. I mean, I think a part of me like wants to say, yes, I would be all for eating somebody or offering myself up to be eaten too, like depending on, the route of how we are going to choose somebody to sacrifice for, the good of the rest of us. And I would like to think that. But tell me, what would you guys choose to? Like, would you be okay with that, or would you be like, "No, I am gonna die out here." Like, I would much rather die out here than eat somebody else because I honestly think both are right. Like, I don't know. I feel like this whole thing, like, has me have a lot of mixed feelings, I guess, because it's like I do see the side of it as, like, murdering somebody is bad, but I don't necessarily think that the murder's done nefariously, so, I think that does kinda change some dynamics to it, but this was a great, great video, so this was very, very well done, and had no idea about this, so I'm glad I know about it now, and, this was a really, really good one. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, I really appreciate you guys being here. Be sure to go and like and subscribe to Scary Interesting, he has just a fantastic channel if you are into this kind of stuff. But that's going to do it for me. I hope you guys had a great day, and I will see you in the next one.